The Border Patrol is testing high-tech ID scanners at the Otay Mesa port of entry in a new effort to secure the border. San Diegans mark Human Rights Day with a rally for refugees down on the waterfront. I'm Susan Murphy. Those stories coming up tonight on KPBS Evening Edition. We'll also continue our series on California's right to die law, what doctors are saying about it. Also tonight, 2016 could be another tough year for sea lions along the California coast. What wildlife experts are saying about the outlook for marine mammals. And we'll meet an artist whose work is a real feast for the eyes. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The San Diego Unified School District got served with a warrant today from the County District Attorney's Office. It involves an investigation into trustee Marnie Foster. She's been accused of abusing her powers in incidents ranging from a staff shakeup at the School for Creative and Performing Arts to a fundraiser held to cover her son's college expenses. The district is already conducting its own investigation and says it will cooperate with the DA. Today, the investigation into shootings in San Bernardino led to a lake a few miles from the site. An FBI dive team searched the lake in a community park. A spokesman says there was a lead that the suspects came to the area. He wouldn't say what the divers were looking for, but says the lake search could take days. For some people, crossing the border into San Diego now requires more than a passport. KPBS tech reporter David Wagner says agents at the Otay Mesa port of entry are now asking some border crossers to pose for a biometric snapshot.
Otay Mesa is now the only U.S. border crossing where people walking into the country will have their faces scanned. It's part of a new Customs and Border Protection program testing biometrics at the border. So under this new pilot program, there's a new step to crossing into California for non-U.S. citizens. They have to come up to one of these kiosks and have their faces and irises scanned. CBP Assistant Port Director Joseph Meisenhelter says the agency wants to know if tracking people's unique physical features could improve national security.
This will address certain issues as far as, is that the same person on the document, potential visa overstays, so we'll know with certainty, did that person really leave the United States.
For now, this testing is only happening at the Otay Mesa pedestrian crossing, and CBP says it is not scanning the faces of U.S. citizens. The testing ends on June 30th. At that point, CBP will decide whether or not to expand this technology to other border crossings. David Wagner, KPBS News.
This is Human Rights Day, marking the anniversary of the United Nations Declaration of Fundamental Rights that should be protected for everyone. Tonight, San Diegans are marking the day with a rally on the downtown waterfront to support refugees. KPBS Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks is there.
That's right. We're here where hundreds are expected to gather to draw attention to the refugee experience. They want to counter recent negative rhetoric that's been in the news. And they also want to urge local officials to continue welcoming refugees here to San Diego. And that's a response to statements from several governors who said they will not welcome Syrian refugees in their states. I spoke earlier with one of the organizers of tonight's event. Ramla Sahid is executive director of the Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans.
I think they should know that San Diego is a refugee city. We've resettled over 78,000 people since the early 70s, and they're part of our community. And I think people should understand that when we have, hate speech and talk about banning Muslims from our city, that it really puts kind of a lot of fear and re-traumatizes people, because that's the same kind of rhetoric that they left behind.
Now we hear her there commenting on Donald Trump's comment earlier on Monday saying he wants to ban Muslims from coming to the United States. That and a bill that would place tighter restrictions on refugees are responses to recent attacks in Paris and San Bernardino. There are concerns that loopholes in the resettlement process may have contributed to those attacks. Here in San Diego, we're still expected to resettle Syrian refugees next year. Annually, we take in about 3,000 refugees from multiple nations. Live at the Waterfront Park, I'm Megan Burks.
San Diego County Supervisor Diane Jacob is sounding a warning note about taking in more refugees. In a statement to KPBS, she said the federal government has failed to address the impact and needs of thousands of refugees who have already been placed in our region. She also says, I don't feel any more confident about its ability to handle and vet additional refugees from war-torn areas. Federal officials say 2016 could be another difficult year for sea lions along the Southern California coast. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has details.
Federal researchers go to San Miguel Island each fall to gauge the health of the sea lion population. The island, located off the coast of Santa Barbara, and it's a major breeding area for sea lions and seals. Sharon Moline is a federal research biologist who went on this year's survey, and she says many pups on the island are significantly underweight.
The pup weights were the lowest recorded in 41 years. So we started monitoring in 1975. So this was the lowest year since then. And the average weight of female pups was about 11.8 kilograms.
Mellon says that's more than 30% below what's considered normal. She says the marine mammals are having a tough time finding enough food, and warm ocean waters are likely to blame. Climatologists say warm waters are affecting the sea lion's food supply.
The tropical El Nino has done this repeatedly through history, and it's going to continue to do that. And we have other things that happen, like this warm blob, which in many ways is unlike the El Nino effect, but it's another part of the sort of natural variability.
Marine mammal rescue centers are gearing up for an influx of sea lions needing help. 2015 and 2013 were record-setting years for sea lion mortality. Researchers say the marine mammals have struggled in 5 of the last 7 years. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
There are also worries about whales off the California coast. They're getting tangled in fishing lines and nets at an alarming rate. More than 60 whales of various species have been spotted trailing fishing gear this year alone. Gillian Flaccus of the Associated Press reports that's more than 400% above normal.
California coastal waters, a prime viewing spot for whales migrating south. But recently, whale sightings have taken an ugly turn. Dozens of whales have been spotted trapped in fishing lines and nets, unable to free themselves. More than 60 entangled whales have been confirmed off the coast this year, a 425% spike.
We have seen a pretty substantial increase in the number of reports of entangled whales along the whole west coast, from Washington down through California. In particular, we've been getting a lot of reports from California.
Most are endangered humpbacks, but blue, gray, minke, and fin whales have also been trapped.
Right there is the last one we saw, Jodes.
For the volunteers who untangle them in the open ocean, it's a dangerous and exhausting job. Success is often elusive.
We had one humpback just recently that was badly entangled by gillnet, to a point where it went into its mouth, draped over its head. It was an animal that was languishing and something that it was a situation that we couldn't really rectify.
Captain Dave Anderson has watched the crisis unfold from his whale watching boats.
That's just the tip of the iceberg as far as what we know is going on. Most of the whales that are entangled we're not seeing.
Experts think warming coastal waters from El Nino may be drawing the whales closer to shore in pursuit of prey. There, they run into crab or lobster pots sunk deep in the water, or nets that have fanned out under the waves.
There was a sea lion in the net. There was a two fish or 3
2
fish?
leopard sharks, one little one and one bigger one.
This winter's crab season was recently put on hold because of a toxic algae bloom. But when crabbing does resume, scientists working with crab fishermen will experiment with different types and configurations of line, and may even mark where crabbers drop their pots with GPS technology.
Whales are there and crab pots are there. So if there's something that we can accomplish working together where we can study this, we're all for doing it.
An alliance on land that might help untangle a growing problem under the water. Gillian Flaccus, Associated Press, Dana Point, California.
As they add up the marijuana seized in San Diego County this year, members of the local and federal task force looked at an unexpected measure, how much the illegal industry may be adding to local water woes. KPBS's Steve Walsh has the story.
The amount of marijuana seized this year from outdoor growers fell roughly 20% in San Diego County, according to the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration. Drought is to blame for the dip. For the first time, illegal growers were also called out for the amount of water they use.
Because of the concern throughout the communities of drought, we've realized this is something we wanted to focus on, to realize what kind of an impact that really has.
Roughly 75,000 plants seized from outdoor growers translated into roughly 75 million gallons of water. Water that sometimes comes from illegally tapping into local water providers like Valley Central.
It's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you money because I have to raise my rates to offset the loss. And if I don't meet my conservation goals, then I'm going to be fined by the state of California.
A total of 115 arrests were made, including indoor growers. Law enforcement did not seize plants tied to licensed medical marijuana facilities. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
A new measure aiming to legalize recreational use of marijuana in California is gaining momentum. Several cannabis organizations have jumped behind the Adult Use of Marijuana Act proposed by Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom.
5 years ago, the lieutenant governor wouldn't endorse this, right, and numerous other people wouldn't even come close. And now we're in a situation where we have numerous lawmakers coming out to talk about the issue. And it's not because they love weed and they want everyone to go get high. It's because they see it's a broken policy.
State tax officials estimate the cannabis industry in California is worth billions of dollars, and so far, several measures have been established to regulate the industry. Advocates for the law are hoping to have it on the ballot in February. U.S. educators are leaving behind No Child Left Behind, replacing it with Every Student Succeeds. The new education bill was signed today by President Barack Obama. No Child Left Behind was the George W. Bush-era law intended to improve schools. And the president says its goals were good, setting high standards, requiring accountability, and closing the achievement gap.
But in practice, it often fell short. It didn't always consider the specific needs of each community. It led to too much testing during classroom time. It often forced schools and school districts into cookie-cutter reforms that didn't always produce the kinds of results that we wanted to see.
Testing won't go away under the new law, but states are encouraged to limit testing, and the federal government may not mandate or offer incentives for using the Common Core. PBS NewsHour will have more on the signing of Every Student Succeeds tonight at 7. More than 100 people with developmental disabilities, along with their caregivers and advocates, rallied today outside of Assembly Speaker Tony Atkins' downtown office. They carried signs, cheered loudly, and called on Atkins and other state leaders to increase funding by 10% to the agencies that support them. Matthew Maurer is Director of Community Employment for the ARC of San Diego. The nonprofit provides living assistance to 2,500 people with intellectual disabilities. He says his organization has not had a rate increase in more than a decade. Instead, they were hit with a 10% cut during the recession.
We're at the brink of collapse, essentially, this whole system. And that's not just our operation, but it's all organizations like ours throughout the state of California.
Tony Atkins is in Paris at the climate conference, but her office provided a statement. The speaker stated just last month that with strong revenue forecasts from the Legislative Analyst's Office, she supports providing meaningful new investments in developmental disability services. That has not changed. The funding issue is expected to be debated at a special legislative session in January. The nation's biggest mall operator is wading into the fight over a shopping center proposed for the shores of the Carlsbad Lagoon. Westfield has donated $75,000 to a small nonprofit group opposed to the center. From the KPBS North County Bureau, Allison St. John says the project's developer, Caruso Affiliated, is fighting back.
This means a lot more money will be spent on the battle for Measure A, a special election in Carlsbad, to see if the voters want a new upscale shopping centre anchored by Nordstrom on the Agua Hedionda Lagoon. Westfield has now provided graphics of what the new project might look like. Till now, Caruso Affiliated has focused on more romanticized artists' renderings and pictures of the 85% of the property that would be maintained as open space. Westfield says it's contributing the money because it's spent millions on complying with California's environmental laws and does not want to see rival developer Caruso bypass those laws with the initiative process. It's not a surprise to see Westfield weigh in, even though the corporation has recently sold its mall just up Interstate 5. It still has big malls nearby at UTC. Standing at Caruso's new information center on the site, Caruso Vice President Matt Middlebrook said today that Westfield has a history of backing, quote, phony front groups to kill competition. In this case, though, the opposition, nonprofit Citizens for North County, has raised $18,000 on its own to collect signatures for the special election. That's compared to more than $5 million Caruso has already spent to promote the project. Citizens for North County says the group is grateful for the money and, quote, we are now about $5.2 million shy of an even playing field. Carlsbad residents will vote on Measure A in February. From the KPBS North County Bureau, I'm Alison St. John.
The deadline to sign up for health insurance through Covered California is less than a week away. Today, the Insurance Exchange released a heat map for San Diego County. It shows places where it's believed there are high numbers of people who are eligible for federal subsidies but may not have taken advantage of them. Officials say the map helps them focus their enrollment efforts on places where the uninsured are living. The deadline to enroll is December 15th. Next year, California will become the 5th state to allow the terminally ill to take their own life with the help of lethal dose of drugs from a physician. In this second part of our 3-part series, KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg talks with some San Diego doctors to get their point of view, and he tells us how the law has worked in Oregon.
The Douglas and Nancy Barnhart Cancer Center is part of the Sharp Chula Vista Medical Campus.
This is the radiation therapy treatment room, and this is the linear accelerator.
Dr. Philip Zentner is a radiation oncologist. The linear accelerator is one of the most powerful tools for treating cancer. The machine uses high-energy X-rays to destroy cancer cells. Dr. Zentner says he can attack tumors with sub-millimeter accuracy.
And so we can treat really small lesions, we can treat brain lesions, we can treat very sophisticated treatments with this machine. And we can also do things that are really, really simple.
Radiation therapy can be used in combination with surgery and chemotherapy to treat cancer. But as Zentner explains, it's also used to help ease the pain of patients whose cancer is too far gone. And in those cases,
the primary endpoint is really about comfort care, about how do we make this patient comfortable.
Zentner says California's new aid in dying law gives patients another option.
For some patients, it's going to be a very welcomed option because they're going to be in tremendous pain or they're going to be in suffering. And for those of us who have witnessed patients go through this process, there's going to be some patients who are going to choose this option that before this was not available for them.
Critics of California's law believe it will create an environment that could encourage people who are terminally ill to take their own life. But that hasn't been the experience in Oregon. In 1994, Oregon became the first state to approve a so-called death with dignity law. Last year, 155 people in Oregon died from taking a lethal dose of drugs under the law. That represented less than 0.5% of the total number of deaths in the state. Advocates say the law has prompted more people to take advantage of hospice care. In fact, Medicare data reveals in 2013, Oregon had the 6th highest utilization of hospice care in the nation. Supporters hope California's law will lead to similar trends here, and they hope it will compel doctors to become more comfortable talking about death.
Scripps has its own hospice.
Okay. Dr. Holly Yang specializes in hospice medicine and palliative care at Scripps Health. She says doctors don't get much training in having end-of-life discussions. Yang says, as a result, they often do a disservice to terminally ill patients who have questions about what lies ahead.
And we simply just say, oh gosh, I feel sorry for you, here's a prescription, or we say, I don't do that, sorry, don't talk to me about that. That doesn't actually address the root cause of why they're asking. It doesn't get to the heart of the matter, which is I'm in a vulnerable place, I'm worried, and my family needs help, and so do I.
Dr. Robert Wales is a pain management specialist with offices in Oceanside and Encinitas. He says in other states with aid in dying laws, more people have requested a lethal dose of drugs than have actually taken them.
But I think that's a good reflection of one of the reasons why patients want to have this available, is just to have control, to have that option. And they may not exercise the option. Again, the majority of patients do not exercise the option, even though they have the means to do it in hand.
Here we go.
Tomorrow, in our final episode,
up the hill,
we'll visit with a San Diego woman who wants to take her own life before her disease takes total control. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
KPBS video journalist Katie Shulov is helping to produce this series. You can find more online at kpbs.org.
I'm Gwen Eiffel on the next News Hour. How a Vermont ski resort cashed in on a little-known visa program. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
This is the season where you can find cookies and candy and other sweets everywhere you look, even here on Evening Edition. Here's a zero-calorie look at the work of Sacramento artist Robin Slakey.
Well, I kind of run the gamut of different arts. I've taught for 35 years, so I had to learn everything and know everything to teach it. And so now I do a whole range of things. A friend of mine told me that I should do my art, do something that you love. And so I like desserts, and so that's when I started doing an ice cream cone first. And these were totems, so these were like 6 feet tall. So a 6 foot tall totem of ice cream cones, cupcakes. The kids really responded to it. It went up, and then at the very top, it kind of tipped over. Look, it was going to tip over the last little cupcakes. Just the response from the food was really positive, and so that's when I kind of pursued that. Mainly what I want people to do is to be happy and to smile. I made a 10-foot tower of donuts. I had it at a show and I stood back and watched it, and to have all sorts of people, ages and backgrounds, and they would just come up to it and they'd just start smiling. And that to me was a success. I always tell my friends that your next one is your best one. And every time I do something, I look to see how I can improve the next one. The cupcakes came from, I saw a show down in LA with my brother-in-law about art from the street. It was about graffiti and how it had taken the concept of that art doesn't have to be in the galleries, that it can be for the masses. So I started doing it on lawn signs. And so I would take the art, my cupcakes, and I'd go stick them on my friend's lawn while they were at work, and so they would come home and see a cupcake. And then we took a trip, and we were in, I think, South Dakota, and there was somebody that had stuck up a Post-it that was very negative in one of the rest stops. So I took it down, and I stuck up a cupcake. And then I just started sticking up more and more, and we'd go to restaurants. We'd leave a tip, but I'd also stick a cupcake in there. And so then I just started dropping them all around and then taking pictures of it. And so I entitled it Cupcakes Across America. Oh, we went all the way back to Kohler, Wisconsin, Sheboygan, Washington, D.C., up to Salem, Portland, all sorts of strange and funny places. To me, art is like breathing. You know, you just have to do it. I know that they talk about musicians. Well, why do you do music? Well, I have to. An artist is who I am, not what I do.
Sacramento artist Robin Slakey. You can see more art stories like that on KPBS Spectrum, Saturday evenings at 5:30. Recapping tonight's top stories, the San Diego Unified School District got served with a warrant today from the County District Attorney's Office. It involves an investigation into trustee Marnie Foster. She's been accused of abusing her powers in incidents ranging from a staff shakeup at the school for the creative and performing arts to a fundraiser held to cover her son's college expenses. The district is already conducting its own investigation and says it will cooperate with the DA. The Border Patrol is testing a new biometrics system at the Otay Mesa port of entry. Non-U.S. citizens crossing into California now have to pose in front of a new kiosk to have their faces and irises scanned. Customs and Border Protection says it wants to know if tracking people's unique physical features could improve national security. And 2016 is expected to be another difficult year for sea lions along the Southern California coast. Marine mammal researchers say recent surveys of a rookery on San Miguel Island revealed most sea lion pups are significantly underweight. They are in worse shape than any time since the annual survey began 41 years ago. 3,300 sea lions were rescued along the California coast earlier this year. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.